Hello and welcome to another of PAVE's weekly virtual discussions. My name is Ed Niedermeyer. I am the policy, I'm sorry. My name's Ed Niedermeyer. I'm the Director of Communications for Partners for Automated Vehicle Education. I am really excited today. This is our first panel of October. And for this month, we're really trying to emphasize what are called vulnerable road users. So this is Pedestrian Safety Awareness Month, and we're sort of expanding that a little bit. Vulnerable road users includes pedestrians and cyclists. This is an area where, unfortunately, some of the safety statistics right now are kind of going the wrong direction. We think automation has a role to play in helping address some of those issues and hopefully really get progress back on track. And so we're trying to highlight some of that over this month. So we're starting off today by looking at what we can sort of do in the shorter term with driver assistance rather than fully autonomous vehicles. And I'm really excited. We've got some really amazing guests here to help discuss this. First up, we have Ken McLeod. He's the policy director for the League of American Bicyclists and a regular attendee of PAVE's virtual discussions. We're really happy to have him on the other side of the camera this time.
Excited to be here.
We're also really excited to have a brand new PAVE member, actually, from FLIR, one of the leading companies in infrared thermal imaging. We have Mike Walters. He's the vice president for micro camera product management. Mike, welcome.
Glad to be here as well. Looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, and again, welcome to PAVE 2 to FLIR. This is really exciting that you've all joined us. And then from Toyota, we have Rini Sherony. She's the senior principal engineer for the Toyota Collaborative Safety Research Center. Rini, welcome.
Thank you, Ed. I'm happy to join the discussion today.
So, it's usually best with these sorts of things to start by looking at sort of what is really the problem here. I mentioned sort of some of the numbers going the wrong way. Ken, I want to start with you on this. Can you give us just an overview of sort of some of what's happening out there with pedestrian and cyclist safety statistics in the US right now?
Yeah, in the US, we've really seen a dramatic rise in pedestrian and bicyclist deaths over the last decade or so. We've recently reached 30-year highs for both pedestrian and bicyclist deaths, and we're seeing people in cars getting safer and people outside of cars getting less safe, so they're a greater percentage of traffic deaths. And the data is really saying that those deaths are really happening on higher speed urban and suburban roadways that often lack basic safety infrastructure for people biking and walking. We've also seen a dramatic rise in SUVs and trucks, and cars being larger and more powerful than ever. And that's additionally creating more dangers for people biking and walking. There's some really great resources out there, like Andrew Schmidt's new book, Right of Way, Race, Class, and the Silent Epidemic of Pedestrian Deaths, and some great resources from America Walks for people who want to watch webinars or learn more about these issues.
Awesome, that's great. Yeah, no, I love being able to share those resources where people can go out and learn more for themselves. Mike, Rini, do you have things to add on sort of this problem?
Yeah, one of the things that's kind of dramatic in terms of the pedestrian deaths, some estimated 6,590 pedestrian deaths in 2019, according to the Governor's Highway Safety Association, but about 76% of those deaths are happening at night. So that's really interesting. I think it's a little contrasting. I think most of the bicyclist fatalities happen in the daytime. I think it's just differences. People are walking all the time and tending to ride bikes a little more in the daytime.
Yeah. So Rini, I mean, this is if we're going to solve a problem, we need to not just know the scope of it, but sort of where and when it's happening. So we've heard sort of higher speed on urban and suburban roads. We've heard at night for pedestrians. What else do we sort of know about this problem?
So yeah, so we know a couple of things, because when we design a system, first we look at the crash statistics and other data to understand where it's happening, how it's happening. One interesting thing we found out when we were doing the analysis a couple of years ago is the nighttime pedestrian fatalities doesn't happen in more of an urban environment, but it's more of a rural environment on 2-lane roads and heavy speed with not much ambient artificial lighting. So as a result, it was difficult for the drivers cameras to see that there was somebody on the side of the road. And these roads also were not designed for people to be walking. So it doesn't have a sidewalk, didn't have like even a large, side divider there where people could have some space between the car and the pedestrian. But we know the statistics, we understand where it's happening. And so when we design our system, we are designing to address some of these issues, that not only just for low speed, but higher speed, and nighttime condition is definitely one we're looking at for the systems we're designing.
Yeah. Ken, do you have anything to add on the sort of where and when, or do we cover that pretty well so far?
I think you covered it pretty well. I mean, there certainly are the issues in the urban and suburban areas. We've seen kind of poverty spread to more suburban areas that were built without pedestrians or bicyclists in mind, and you often have those high-speed arterial roadways. But that's going to be an infrastructure thing as well as a vehicle thing. I would like to say that as part of Pedestrian Safety Month, we joined with Advocates for Highway and Auto Safety, sending a letter to NHTSA asking for some vehicle safety improvements, one of which was an improvement in lighting standards, because something as simple as better lighting in vehicles can help save lives for pedestrians who, as we've heard, are getting killed at night.
Yeah. Rini, I want to go back to you and we've seen a lot of automation coming into cars and driver assistance, particularly going into cars today. But a lot of it seems to be really oriented around sort of interactions with other cars. So adaptive cruise control, where the radar can match speed with the vehicle in front of you, and things like that. We haven't seen a lot of automation. I assume that part of it is this is just challenging. So let's there may be other factors which we can explore, but let's just talk about why is this a difficult problem to address with sort of any form of automation or driver assistance?
So one good news is now we do have pedestrian detection and bicycle detection on our production system. So if you buy any car with the latest TSS Toyota Safety Sense or Lexus Safety Sense 2 Plus, then that does have the detection ability for pedestrians, both in daylight and low light conditions, and bicyclists during the daylight. So these systems detect the pedestrian or bicyclist, and it gives warning to the driver. And if the driver doesn't take any action, it actually initiates fully autonomous braking. So these are part of ADAS system. These are not considered fully automated driving. And based on our investigation of other people, the other OEMs are also introducing the similar pedestrian and bicycle detection system. So one thing to note, in Europe, it is now part of their NCAP. So Euro NCAP requires all the new vehicles, and as a result, the global OEMs they have to introduce the pedestrian and bicycle detection for Europe. So we're taking that advantage and introducing it in the US, although there's no NCAP requirements right now. And some of the preliminary system data from IIHS. So IIHS Hildy, the insurance portion of IIHS, they get the actual insurance data from all the different insurance companies, so they can do a real-time benefit analysis of same car without the system and newer car same with the system. Is there a difference in the crashes, different types? And it is showing pretty significant improvement. So as these systems penetrate more heavily, then we are going to see a lot more benefit. And again, it's impossible to address all scenarios. Some of the scenarios are very, very complex, but we don't want to wait till everything is perfect, because then you are not addressing the easier scenario. So we are constantly rolling out system and adding more improvements to it so that we can address and help reducing these fatalities, or at least mitigate the injuries more and more.
Okay, and I want to get Mike in here, but really quickly, you mentioned the system that has pedestrian detection now on the road today. Just really briefly, what do those systems include? Like what kind of sensor do they use? Just give us a brief sense.
Right. So the sensors they use are already in most of those cars. The millimeter wave radar, which is already used for adaptive cruise control, or the vehicle AB, vehicle emergency braking system. The same radar is used for the pedestrian and the bicycle. Also, there's cameras also in the cars for lane keeping assist and lane departure. So we didn't need it to include really significantly more sensors. So just adjusting the algorithm profiling for the pedestrian and bicycle detection, that was needed. So no new significant sensors we did for any of this.
Yeah. And so, Mike, I want to, obviously one of the things that I get excited about is the potential for new kinds of technology to sort of take performance to a whole other level. But oftentimes, those are really expensive at first. And I know particularly with thermal, there have been some automotive applications of that. They've kind of tended to be a little bit higher. But talk us a little through like what thermal can do to sort of further sort of make more progress on this issue, and particularly maybe then we can get into sort of the market challenge as well as just the technical challenge.
Sure. So thermal cameras look at heat and not light. Many of us have probably seen thermal cameras recently, perhaps with coronavirus, being used to screen employees at entrances to factories. So we're able to see heat, and this means we give the car the ability to see and understand its environment very well at nighttime. And so this ability to see pedestrians at night or in bad weather or difficult lighting situations like driving into a rising or setting sun, when we're able to accurately perceive the environment in those situations, we're able to bring a new sensor stream of information to the vehicle and allow the vehicle to perform better in these complex situations, because it can correctly recognize and identify pedestrians or animals and take the appropriate action. So we recently conducted some testing at the American Center for Mobility with a system that combined radar, visible cameras, and thermal cameras, and we're able to demonstrate some significant improvements in automatic emergency braking in these difficult nighttime scenarios.
Yeah. So again, part of the challenges of this is technological, right? And sort of advancing the state of the art there. But then there's also this question of, of market adoption and being able to sort of bend the price curve on some of these new technologies. And Ken, it seems like, and I know that the cycling community in particular is kind of sensitive to this sense that kind of people don't care enough about, cyclist safety. And that maybe even if we have these technologies, that there's a question of, will people sort of pay money, not just to protect them and their family, but others who are outside the car who they might not know and might have that same. Can you sort of speak to some of those concerns?
I mean, I think there is some concern, as we've seen with the rise of SUVs and trucks. There's this idea that larger vehicles will protect you as the occupant, and who cares what happens to the people in the other vehicle or the person you might hit with that large car or truck, including pedestrians and bicyclists. So there's certainly that as an issue, and we've seen some trucks just get incredibly large and pose particular dangers to pedestrians because they'll be hit at the chest height, and these blunt front ends will guide them underneath the vehicle rather than onto the hood and away from that danger. So that is definitely a concern and something we are seeing in vehicles today. From my perspective, what I see for consumer adoption is that we really need NHTSA through its NCAP program, or Congress through its power to make legislation, to make these things standard, and to get these new technologies into vehicles as quickly as possible in as many vehicles as possible, and make sure that they're at the lowest trim levels and not just something marketed to people who have the means to get them. These are life-saving features, and they should absolutely be standard.
Yeah, and Rini, so we know that there are sort of some of those pedestrian crash standards in Europe. Do we have a sense of sort of how much these different things can affect this problem, like so automation or driver's assistance systems versus that kind of more passive safety approach? Do we have a sense? Can we compare those things?
Yes, of course. So I always say prevention is better than cure. So in case, if for passive safety, you have to have the impact before any of those work. So in case you have impact, yes, this is good. But the best thing to do is to avoid or impact at a significant lower speed, which is the mitigation. So auto braking, and that's why in Europe, the Euro NCAP is so pushing this technology. They firmly believe that the avoidance or the significant drop in speed is what is going to contribute to the high percentage of fatality reduction or injury reduction. If somebody goes from very high severe injury to minor injury, that's a huge benefit because they just walk away from it, or with few, very small things. So, and those things could only be achieved using active safety crash avoidance systems. So I think that's going to continue to be the key, more and more penetration in the coming years.
Yeah, and Mike, so I know there's been some really creative sort of implementations of thermal. I know one company, one supplier, I think it was an option on BMWs maybe, where they would use thermal detection. And I think it was mostly aimed at actually preventing animal crashes, I'm not sure, but they would be able to detect the animal and then actually have lights sort of shine on them. So there's things beyond just automation that we can use some of these technologies to make people a better driver. Can you speak to that?
Right, Ed, I'm really glad you brought that up. The technology you're talking about is a little bit in line with what Rini was talking about as well. This is a directed spotlight. So if you have a sensor system, in that case of the BMW, you have a thermal camera sensor, you detect an animal or pedestrian, and then you direct the headlights of the vehicle at a very low angle so you're not blinding the pedestrian. But you kind of have a natural and very kind of elegant user interface. The driver is looking down the road, the spotlights, the headlights direct the driver's attention to something they should be concerned with. They can slow down, pay closer attention. So it's a really kind of elegant man-machine interface. And that's something that we'd really like to see more broadly adopted. It's been delayed in the US a bit because of concerns of those directed headlights actually blinding the pedestrian or blinding other drivers. But implementations that again have a directed this spotlight at a low angle really get around that problem, and I think hold a lot of promise.
Yeah, and I wanted to add that to what Mike's comment is. We also are looking at similar things. So we did a research study with University of Iowa, we just completed last year. We published several papers on it, where that's what we did. So if we have a very specific part of the headlight, it illuminates a spotlight on the foot of either the pedestrian or bicycle and kind of creates this image in front of them. So and it's purple, it only works at nighttime, because that's when you need to have like better understanding that somebody is there standing or walking or crossing the road. And the goal is not only for driver to see it, but also for the pedestrian and bicycle to be aware that, oh, I have a light on my foot. Then they stop and look around to see what is causing, and that grabs their attention, because a lot of times people don't know that the car behind them. And the study we used in the simulator with a lot of like just regular people we recruited, and they experienced the system, and from that we saw absolutely, compared to a regular car which doesn't have any of those, to those spotlight featured vehicles, there is much higher benefit. The people drivers see them better. As a result, they brake earlier or they go around, and even the pedestrian and bicycles see them, so they stop and they don't cross right in front of the car. So currently, like Mike said, those are not legally allowed to be introduced in the US. They are legally allowed in Europe and Japan. So those the places are going to be introduced first. But Toyota with other OEMs, we have been lobbying to NHTSA for a while to allow to change the regulations so that these systems can be introduced. And now we have data which study done in US which shows that these systems are really beneficial. And honestly, we didn't see a lot of negative impact that it's going to startle other drivers, because it's not even pointed to the other driver, it's pointed at the foot of the pedestrian and bicycle. So they are also like not startled. We didn't see any big startling. We only saw pretty significant benefit.
And is this something that would be like, and not to get too deep in the policy weeds here, but would this be like an FMVSS exemption? Is that where sort of the issue is, or what?
Yeah, it's some type of, I'm a hardcore engineer. I don't get involved in policy so much. Our DC office deals with that, but this is going to be some form of FMVSS. I think modification is needed to be able to be allowed to be introduced. And like I said, it's not just Toyota, BMW, Mercedes, a lot of the other OEMs, they also want the same thing.
Yeah, well, we live in a time of such technological change that this is sort of becoming a recurring theme in a number of areas that we do need to sort of keep with the times. I love taking this conversation beyond just automation, because driver assistance can be so many different things, just augmenting the driver's capabilities. And one of the things we had a question from the audience, actually from Hyundai. What do you anticipate to be the role of driver monitoring systems? I think that's, in pedestrian VRU safety. And I think that's always an important thing to discuss in the context of any kind of driver assistance. But maybe even, there's talk from some automakers about even having driver monitoring without any form of, regardless of whether there's any assistance or not. So I don't know who wants to jump on this question first of how they see the role of driver monitoring in addressing this challenge. Ken?
I mean, I'm happy to jump on that question.
Yeah.
I would love to see driver monitoring in all vehicles. I think it holds huge potential for dealing with the dangers of distracted driving, intoxicated driving, as well as improving the efficacy of ADAS systems. I think if we can embrace the role of vehicles helping people drive safer through things like intelligent speed assist, as well as automated emergency braking, and kind of blind spot detection that could say that you're about to turn right in front of a bicyclist, doing that right hook maneuver that we know is so dangerous, or that you're about to open a door into the path of a bicyclist, which is another common dangerous activity often seen in urban areas. I think there's data from Chicago saying 20% of bicyclist injuries are because of people opening doors into them. There's a lot of potential for the vehicle to help people have safer habits, perform safer behaviors, and having driver monitoring systems and intelligent speed assist in all vehicles would be a great step. And we see places like Europe taking that step with intelligent speed assist being standard in vehicles in the coming years, and automated emergency braking being standard in vehicles and tested in Europe. So really the reoccurring theme is the United States is not taking action and is falling behind on all the important safety technologies. And we really need to step up. And this Pedestrian Safety Month is a great time for NHTSA to step up and start updating some of these standards.
Yeah, and Mike, I mean, if you think about, sort of that spotlight system, I mean, sort of in an abstract sense, knowing where a driver's eyes are, that actually opens all kinds of possibilities in terms of how to route information to the driver the right way about things they might not be seeing, right? It opens up a lot of possibilities for maybe augmented rather than, or assisted driving.
Right. I mean, certainly you can do some of the things that Ken was talking about in terms of speed control or something. I think ultimately, I think driver monitoring does have a key role, so I definitely agree with that. And I mean, ultimately, you want to kind of get the driver's attention, get them re-engaged, and maybe even pull over and park if you don't have the driver with you. I mean, that's pretty dramatic, but you're really relying on the driver in a human-driven vehicle to be very responsible in their operation of this vehicle. And if that's not happening, I think it's appropriate to take action.
Yeah, and Rini, I mean, this kind of gets to the issue, right? Which is there's always a little bit of risk that when you, especially if you get more automation, that the driver's just not that alert and present, and that's a big part of the problem, as Ken points out, is just that driver. What are your thoughts on that? And would it be challenging to sort of move in a direction where every car sort of has driver monitoring all the time? Is that something that might, I don't know if your research touches on this specifically. We didn't really prepare for this question too deeply, but I'm curious about your thoughts about that.
Yeah, so driver monitoring is important, and we are adding it more and more cars being introduced because it does help to know if the driver is paying attention or not. Because if the driver is not paying attention, you can activate the warning and the braking even earlier, because that they if the warning is much later and they're distracted, they may not be able to take any action. So those things are important, and we're also looking into all the different scenarios. where you potentially can have, distraction mode or lack of engagement. We have a project with MIT Age Lab where we are doing a naturalistic data collection and analysis for a couple of years now, where this is what we're specifically looking with regular driver their own car with level 1 systems and some newer level 2 systems, and see at what scenarios they tend to get more disengaged, and what is the best way to bring their engagement back. So like I said in the beginning, anytime you do a countermeasure for it to be effective for the people in this country, for US population, for US systems, and the driving environment, you need to understand what's going on. So we are continuing to do all this research so that we can enhance our future systems to be most effective.
Yeah. So Roy Gothi in the Q&A brings up a really interesting question, which is, you can, and I'm paraphrasing here, but you can sort of develop all the driver assistance in the world that you want, but if people don't really understand how to use it properly, it might not make a difference, or if they could just turn them off. So sort of is a certain amount of education at the dealer level going to be sort of an important part of making sure that these systems are going to be actually used effectively?
Yeah, so definitely, like, dealer education is really important, and we have been doing that. And we, in fact, the same with MIT, they did a dealer study. They went different OEM dealerships and tried to see if what kind of education they can get, pretending that they don't know anything about the system. So everybody is doing dealer education, because you're right, they need to understand what's going on and what's going to happen in different scenarios, so they are not taken it by surprise or don't have a problem with it. Some of the automatic emergency braking system obviously don't depend on the driver. It automatically brakes when there is a critical scenarios, but some of the warning system is important that the drivers don't turn it off. And the way to do it is then understand that how it works, what it's doing, and what kind of safety implications will have if they do turn it off. So yes, driver education is important, and we're continuing to enhance that from the dealer and other areas.
I agree with you. Rini, I just wanted to jump in. I totally agree with you. I also think, it's a real critical part of, like, the user interface, the settings of these systems.
Mm-hmm.
If the settings are not annoying, if there's not a lot of false alarms, then people see the benefits and aren't tempted to turn them off. I think it really all starts there.
Correct.
Yeah, and I would actually add, just last week, my colleague Tabitha moderated a fantastic conversation with actually your colleague, Rini, John Lenneman from Toyota's Collaborative Safety Research Center, and going directly into that question of sort of how are people understanding driver assistance technology as it happens. It's a fascinating field. There's some really cool research that's happening there. And I think it's really cool that we've been able to sort of, show that everyone is sort of at least very least aware that this is a serious problem. There may be some differences in how exactly we can approach it, but I think as long as everyone is sort of aware of these problems and aware of the numbers and where it's going, then we can start to at least bit by bit make some of the progress. And I think conversations like this are a part of that. And I certainly hope that folks will we also just had a webinar with DOT about inclusive design, and the thing that every speaker in that said was, it's so important to include end users in this, and I really I think it'd be really cool to see sort of more automakers and folks who are developing these systems, talking to the folks on the ground about sort of what they're seeing in the situations that frighten them and the behaviors and collaborate on that. So hopefully this conversation inspired a little bit of that. I want to thank each and every one of our guests for being here. Ken McLeod, League of American Bicyclists, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Mike Walters from FLIR, thanks so much again. Welcome to PAVE.
Thank you very much. Glad to be a part of PAVE and looking forward to participating in more discussions in the future. And
Rini Sherony from Toyota, thank you so much for being here as well. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you to everyone who took the time to come and watch this. We will have a video recording of this later on our YouTube account if you want to share that with your friends. Also, the previous last week's discussion that I mentioned with John Lenneman and others, that's also available at our YouTube account. If you search for PAVE on YouTube or Partners for Automated Vehicle Education, you'll find that no problem. So thank you all for taking the time. We also have two really fascinating conversations coming up, which go into the more automated technology field. Really fascinating work that's being done to understand pedestrian intent for autonomous vehicles. Really cool stuff. So if you find this at all interesting, be sure to tune in the next couple of weeks. We think you'll continue to enjoy the discussions that we have planned here. So thank you all.